Clint Eastwood faced off against a gang of ruthless bikers. They thought he was just an old man until one phone call changed everything. What happened next left them terrified. Clint took his usual afternoon stroll through the quiet Montana town, his steps steady despite the years behind him. At 94, he still carried himself with the same calm authority that had once defined his Hollywood career. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows over the rustic streets. A light breeze rolled in from the distant hills, carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. Clint adjusted his jacket, savoring the peaceful moment. Locals tipped their hats as he passed, a silent nod of respect to a man who had long earned it. The air hummed with the familiar sounds of daily life, shopkeepers closing up, ranchers loading supplies, and the occasional distant call of a hawk overhead. The warmth of the setting sun bathed Grizzly Jack's roadhouse in an amber glow as Clint approached, the thought of a hot meal and black coffee waiting for him. Then, just as he reached the diner's entrance, the low, thunderous growl of approaching motorcycles shattered the peace. He stopped, turning slightly, watching as 6 roaring machines barreled down the highway, their chrome glinting in the fading light. Trouble had arrived, and Clint Eastwood wasn't about to back down. The roar of motorcycles grew louder, echoing through the quiet Montana afternoon like an approaching storm. 6 riders, clad in worn leather and denim, thundered down the open highway, their chrome-plated machines reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. They moved in tight formation, a pack of wolves prowling for the next victim. At the front rode Duke Riker, a towering brute with cold, calculating eyes and a cruel smirk that rarely left his face. His crew, Chains, Viper, Axel, Tank, and Red, were just as mean, their jackets adorned with the emblem of the Rattlesnakes, a notorious gang known for running drugs and terrorizing small towns. They had no ties to this place, no reason to be here, except for one, power. Small towns like this were easy pickings, full of quiet folk who knew better than to fight back. As they neared the diner, Duke spotted a lone figure walking toward the entrance, his pace slow, deliberate, undisturbed by their arrival. The old man barely acknowledged them, and that made Duke's blood boil. He gestured, signaling his crew to circle around. The bikers swerved, kicking up dust as they blocked Clint's path, their laughter thick with mockery. "Where do you think you're going, old man?" Duke sneered, his voice dripping with amusement. Clint Eastwood, unfazed, lifted his gaze, meeting Duke's stare with an expression of pure, unshakable calm. The gang had found their target, but they had no idea what they were up against. The bikers tightened their circle around Clint, their engines rumbling like distant thunder, kicking up dust in the golden afternoon light. Duke Riker, the gang's towering leader, swung a leg off his chrome-plated Harley and sauntered forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. He smirked, sizing Clint up, mistaking his silence for fear. "You're walking kind of slow, old man," Duke drawled, tilting his head. "Might be time to hand over that wallet before you break a hip." A few of his men chuckled, their laughter laced with arrogance. One biker, a brute covered in faded tattoos, stepped closer, yanking at Clint's jacket. "What do you say, Grandpa? Maybe buy us a round in there?" He sneered, nodding toward Grizzly Jack's roadhouse. Clint didn't flinch. His pale blue eyes, sharp as ever, locked onto the biker's face, his expression unreadable. He slowly adjusted his jacket, brushing the dust from his sleeve. "Son," Clint said, his voice even, steady, and edged with quiet authority, "I'd think twice before making your next move." The air grew tense, the weight of the moment pressing down on the group. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the gang's eyes. Clint Eastwood wasn't scared. He wasn't even rattled. One of the younger bikers shifted uncomfortably, sensing something different about the man they had just cornered. But Duke wasn't about to back down. He spat onto the pavement, rolling his shoulders. "You got a big mouth for someone all alone," he muttered. "Maybe we ought to teach you some respect." Clint remained still. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the diner's entrance, ignoring the gang's taunts. They followed, unaware they were about to regret it. Clint Eastwood sat at his usual corner booth in Grizzly Jack's roadhouse, his black coffee steaming in front of him. Across the diner, the gang of 6 bikers lounged in their seats, laughing loudly, their boots kicked up against the furniture as they harassed the waitress, Maggie. Duke Riker leaned forward, his grin full of mockery. "So, old man," he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear, "you're going to be a good sport and cover our tab, right?" His men chuckled, the air thick with arrogance. Clint, calm as ever, reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number with slow, deliberate movements. The bikers watched, expecting him to call 911, and erupted into laughter. "Ain't nobody coming for you, Grandpa." One sneered, slamming a hand against the table. "You think calling the cops is going to save you?" Clint didn't react. He lifted the phone to his ear and spoke in a steady, controlled tone. "This is Clint. I need a favor." That was all. No panic, no explanation, just a simple request. He ended the call and set his phone on the table, his fingers lightly tapping the rim of his coffee mug. The bikers exchanged amused glances until Chains, one of Duke's more observant men, leaned forward and squinted at the phone screen. Suddenly, his face drained of color. "Boss," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "He didn't call the cops." The diner fell silent. Duke frowned. "What are you talking about?" Chains swallowed hard. "He called the damn state ranger captain." Outside, in the distance, the unmistakable sound of approaching engines cut through the late afternoon air. But this time, they didn't belong to bikers. The deep guttural roar of heavy-duty engines echoed through the valley, cutting through the late afternoon stillness like a warning bell. The bikers stiffened, their laughter dying in their throats as the unmistakable sound grew louder. Through the wide diner windows, Grizzly Jack's patrons turned to watch as a convoy of Montana State troopers and park rangers on ATVs and patrol trucks rolled into the parking lot, their lights flashing in the fading sunlight. The lead vehicle, a black State Ranger SUV, came to a slow stop. The door swung open, and out stepped Ranger Captain Hank Callahan, a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense glare and the kind of authority that could silence a room without a word. The bikers shifted in their seats, their bravado crumbling as Callahan entered the diner, his boots thudding against the floor. His men followed, hands resting near their holsters, scanning the scene. Clint Eastwood barely looked up, taking a slow sip of his coffee. Callahan's eyes locked onto Duke Riker. "You must be real stupid," he said, his voice low and steady, "or real suicidal." Duke tried to force a laugh, but his voice cracked. Now, we were just..." Callahan raised a hand, cutting him off. "Save it." The room was dead silent. One of the younger bikers, pale and sweating, turned to his leader. "Boss, what do we do?" But Duke had no answer. He had already lost. The silence inside Grizzly Jack's roadhouse was deafening as the reality of the situation settled in. The bikers, who had swaggered in with arrogance, now sat frozen, their faces drained of color. Ranger Captain Hank Callahan gave a slow nod to his men, and within seconds, troopers moved in. Handcuffs clinked as they yanked Duke Riker and his crew from their seats, forcing them to their feet. "You boys just made the biggest mistake of your lives," Callahan muttered as they were led outside. Through the diner windows, the setting Montana sun bathed the parking lot in amber light, stretching the bikers' shadows long against the pavement as they were shoved into the backs of patrol trucks. Clint Eastwood, calm as ever, finished his coffee, setting the mug down with a quiet clink. Maggie, the waitress, let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her hands still shaking. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Eastwood," she whispered. Clint gave her a small nod. "Just keep the coffee hot," he said. A few of the regulars chuckled, the tension in the diner finally lifting. Sheriff Callahan shook his head with a smirk. "You know, Clint, you didn't even need me," he said. Clint gave a slow, knowing glance toward the window where the last patrol truck was pulling away. "Maybe not," he muttered, "but I sure do like watching them sweat." With that, he stood, adjusted his jacket, and stepped into the golden evening, unshaken as ever. Life isn't about showing off or proving how tough you are. It's about knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away. Clint Eastwood's story teaches a simple but powerful lesson. Real strength comes from composure, not intimidation. In a world where people are quick to react, get loud, or escalate situations, the smartest move is often staying calm and letting your actions speak for themselves. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned through wisdom, patience, and the ability to outthink your opponent. Whether dealing with workplace drama, online arguments, or real-life confrontation, keeping your cool gives you the upper hand. Hot tempers make mistakes. Steady hands make decisions. And just like Clint in that diner, the most powerful person in the room isn't the loudest one. It's the one who knows exactly when to act, when to wait, and when to let someone else realize they've already lost. Stay sharp, stay steady, and always know who you're dealing with.